On this episode of Horror Face Off, we have cinematic horror at its best, taking on quirky comedy horror with one massive bite. It is Bram Stoker's Dracula versus American Werewolf in London.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Horror Face Off. I am Jason and I am joined with our biggest panel yet. We got Tony. How's it going, Tony?
Good. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Mia.
Intro.
You got an intro? Okay, sorry. I rushed your intro. Okay, sorry, Tony.
No, that was the intro.
That was it? Okay. All right. Yeah, we got no time to waste. Mia, how you doing?
Doing good. It's a different setup than normal, but yeah, we're making it work.
You're still back, and that's all that matters. Liv, welcome back. Haven't talked to you since season 1. How you doing?
Hello. I know it's been a long time. I'm good though.
I'm glad to have you. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
I'm pretty good. Ready for round 3 here.
All right. Yeah, we're buddies now. And we have a newbie, and that's always awesome. And her name is Megan. Megan, tell us a little bit about yourself. Or you don't. You don't have to.
I don't really know what there's to say.
You just
represent 13 Gallows Lane too. I'll throw them out there. One of their models.
Cool. Yeah, they're a cool follow on social media. All right, so we know the rules, and could have gone into a song there. So it's werewolves and vampires. It is American Werewolf in London versus Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So we're going to start off with the plot, and we're going to start off with Brian.
All right. So both of these movies have great plots. I think with Dracula, it's just more classic tale. It's something we've heard before in all these other iterations. American Werewolf is a more original kind of werewolf tale. It does take a lot from like the classic 1941 Wolfman, but it modernizes it a little bit more for the 80s. I think Dracula here has the better story and plot because it is more of a classic tale. There's a little bit more romance in it. Things feel a little bit more, like a standard story structure that we can follow along, where American Werewolf, it feels like things are just happening. So I think Dracula, because it takes so much from the novel as well, is my pick for this one.
All right. Mia.
Well, Dracula was a first time watch for me last night into this morning. I never watched it before because I was never really interested. I just always thought it was like some cheesy, hokey movie. And then after I'm done watching it, I'm like, this is my whole aesthetic now. I love this movie so much. So I'm very inspired by, his hairdo in the beginning and the makeup. But I always try to like theme. I even like bought red wine, so it looked like I was drinking blood. But anyway.
You're
the best.
I love this show very much. I am going to go with Brian here. I think Dracula has more of a plot. In American Werewolf in London, you're kind of just dropped in and you find out that they're best buddies. They're backpacking Europe, but you don't really know their backstory, what led them to go do this, how long they've been friends, whatever. Dracula takes you back 400 years. They show you his reason for being Dracula, basically, and it just goes a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of subplots, and American Werewolf in London kind of just stays straight and narrow. This is what we're doing. He's turning into a werewolf. The end. So I'm gonna go with Dracula.
All right, Tony, are you gonna go with them, or are you gonna go against the grain here?
So, with Werewolf, it's a good point you make there where Bram Stoker's Dracula has more of a backstory, right? Based off a novel, you understand the history, whereas Werewolf is just like immediate start and then immediate end, right? And it kind of catches you off guard. Two Yanks strolling across the moors in England, and they're met by British hospitality, right? They're treated like outsiders. The hospitality is as warm as the beer over there. And and they get a werewolf attack at the beginning, very grisly, pulls Jack apart. So it starts off really strong, and it's a story that feels like it's very original and hasn't been redone, whereas Dracula's been redone over and over again. It's interesting to see new versions of it, but I like the originality of Werewolf, so I'm going to go with that.
Nice. Liv, you're up.
Okay, I will say, first of all, this is difficult because Dracula is my favorite book of all time. But American Werewolf in London is in my top 3 favorite films of all time. So every question is gonna be real hard for me.
Good.
I think that I do have to kind of go with everyone else on this one though, and say that Dracula has a better plot, just because American Werewolf in London, like, again, I love it, one of my favorite films of all time. But like, you have a solid plot in the beginning, and then it kind of just like is almost like weird sketch scenes for 45 minutes, and then the plot comes back. But also things in the plot kind of don't make sense if you think about it for too long. Like, how does he turn into a wolf 2 nights in a row?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change anything about American Werewolf in London, but I'm not recommending it to people because I'm like, it's the most solid plot you've ever seen.
Mhm.
So Dracula?
Yeah, Dracula.
All right. This is it, Megan. Your debut. Go for it.
I mean, I think they all pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one, because you really like, I agree. American Werewolf does start out really strong, that there's a lot of good like pull to make you want to know more, but you don't get the backstory. You don't really know what brought them to backpacking. There's still some unanswered questions. Like, I don't know about the star on the wall in the bar. Like, I feel like they like lead you up to things that they don't fully come back and finish. And then Dracula, like you said, you get more of an explanation to how he became what he is. And yeah, I mean, they've never been able to really redo that romance concept. If you think about it, it's been like, it's so original and so good that they just kind of keep remaking it in Hollywood, just in different variations.
The Dracula?
Yeah. So I would have to say Dracula.
I'm gonna also go with Dracula, but I'm gonna give Tony some love. Like I feel like, yeah, we can harp on, like, the no, but I'm just saying, you can harp on the, like, Werewolf doesn't have a backstory, but sometimes you don't need the backstory, right? Sometimes a movie just is good because you don't know, right? Michael
That makes it
Myers.
creepier, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So I get that, how you could come at it from that angle, but I mean, I don't know really if there's a more classic story than Dracula. Like, I mean, that's from book to screen. I mean, it's almost as perfect as it gets. And I mean, this one took some liberties, obviously. The whole love story is not in the book, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy, like, how passionate that whole love angle was, and and it's the movie that's considered to be closest to the book, but that was kind of not in the book. So, and also having read the book as well, I am like, I was, when I first read it, I was surprised that it's all like diary entries. Like, the whole thing is diary entries, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty, like, I thought it was going to be limiting and stuff, but it moved along well. But anyways, I'm going to give it to Dracula, just because I know it's a redundant story, but it's that way for a reason.
What was the original plot? Was it just to turn everyone in London into a vampire?
Basically, yeah. He really didn't have interest in love and all that. He was just, and then he kind of reigned terror in Transylvania, and then he was heading to London, world domination. So all right, so we're moving on to setting, and for this one, we're gonna start with Mia.
Setting. Okay. Well, to me, American Werewolf in London is beautifully done. I want to go walk the moors. I have friends in England that live like an hour away from a lot of the filming locations, and we always talk about going there because it's really beautiful. That being said, a lot is in the hospital and then her apartment, and I'm all for like a good 80s apartment. But if you're comparing it to Dracula, you're insane to not just want to jump into the screen and be there. Their costumes, that labyrinth at Lucy's house, the castle, everything. It's just, there's like one scene where he's just surrounded by candles. You don't even know where he is. You just see candles around him. And it's just like beautiful. I'm all about cinematography. I'm super inspired by that in my photography, and watching this whole movie, first time watch for me again, I was just like, wow, that's so pretty. Oh my gosh, that's so pretty. Hey, pause that. I want to take a picture. I was just obsessed with it because the setting is so wonderfully done. It really captures that Gothic Victorian era, the 19th century, late 19th century, which is something I'm like super geeking about lately. I've been learning a lot about the Victorian era. So has to be Dracula for me.
All right, so just heads up, if anybody says Werewolf of London, Mia's basically called you crazy. So no pressure. We're going to live.
Okay. You're gonna fight me on this, but only because
I won't fight you, I promise.
No, it's okay if you do. But it's in the title, it's an American Werewolf in London. So the fact that like London is a character in it, and it's important that that is the setting for it, because of the fact that he's seen as like this crazy American dude from college, and like he's so out of his wits, not only like in London itself, but also in this small town that he had been backpacking through at the beginning. And it's just like everything about it is kind of like a weird culture shock to him, even though, I mean, London is probably like the closest culture you could get to America. And I think he like went to NYU, so it's not like he's not used to major metropolitan areas. But I do think that like the setting for Dracula is beautiful. Like they did a wonderful job making like all of this like Gothic scenery for it. I can think of other films that have kind of done similar things. Like it's aesthetically similar to like Phantom of the Opera. So I don't think it's super unique in that. And I think that every version you watch of Dracula, like it's all very Gothic. And I do think that Frances Ford Coppola did an excellent job building these sets and stuff. But it's, I don't think doing as much for like moving the plot along as it does in American Werewolf. So I'm going with American Werewolf.
Cool. And a lot of this is like, you know, your opinion, right? And what speaks to you. And the setting might just resonate with you for a certain reason. So, I mean, that's why we ask the questions. Megan.
Oh, goodness. Okay. This is really hard to decide because they both have such really good points. Like the American Werewolf, it's in London. You know that it's in London. You don't even have to question that. And actually, I was doing a little bit of reading, and they actually were having issues with like the two main characters or actors getting rights to be in London for the filming. And they almost were going to be recast with people who were British, but they were like, no, we really want Americans to play Americans in this. But then that being said, with Dracula, I was reading also that they pretty much use a soundstage for most of that scenery. And that takes talent because I would never have thought that that was mostly a soundstage. So it's really hard. I don't know. And she's right. Like it does do a lot with moving the plot along in the American Werewolf. Can we circle back? I don't know.
Oh man, this is the first time I've had to put my foot down. I'm gonna say no. Just
I'm gonna go with Dracula just because I think it took a lot of talent to do the soundstage setup that they did, because there was like a lot of outdoor scenes, like you had the horses running, and I found out that they actually had to make them run a lot in like a circle to make it look like they were going longer distances. So I'm gonna give it to Dracula.
all right. By the way, I would have let you circle back, but I kind of wanted to put the pressure on you to get the answer from you. So all right. All right, Tony, you're up.
Yeah, settings are, I think, you know, for me at least, it really makes the movie. Slaughtered Lamb versus Castle Dracula. And I love the Slaughtered Lamb. And you know, Megan, you mentioned the star, right? It's the first time we call it pentangle. I prefer to call it pentacle or pentacles if we're talking plural. But if you had to compare Castle Dracula to the pub, I'd choose Castle Dracula, Victorian London, you know, Harker's Estate, the lunatic asylum, right? I think, you know, all that combined really kind of puts you in that space. And it's Dracula.
Dracula for Tony. All right, Brian.
So Dracula has like some amazing sets, like we said, the whole gothic look is rivals any of the even classic Universal monster movies from the 30s and 40s. But I'm really into like realism with the sets, like something that the Dracula movie does that I notice is like it does feel like a set to me. So with American Werewolf in London, these were like real places they went to go film. Like you could go to these places. Um, Everything feels lived in. The people in the background were probably just people there on the day of. Uh, I know that John Landis had this idea for the setting ever since, like nothing changed really from the original script when he wrote it years before they started filming. So the theater they were gonna go film in was actually a cartoon theater, but then they by the time they got there to film, they had to change to a porno theater. So it was just like I love that. I like all the little like kind of small details. Like he just made it. He worked. The script didn't really serve the the place. The place served the script. So for me, it's American Werewolf in London.
Cool.
They should have named the porno American Werewolf in London, right?
Real.
All right.
Like little homage in there.
All right, so I love Werewolf in London's setting, especially in the early going, and then after it kind of, I don't know, it was okay, but in the early going, like on the moors, like, you know, and then just in the pub, like we'd like to go there with my friends. That being said, to me, the setting of Dracula in most movies usually wins. I just want to be there. And yeah, so I'm gonna give it to Dracula. All right, so now we move on to filmmaking, and for this one, we're gonna start with, who should I start on? I'm gonna go with Megan.
Gosh, I don't really know what to say about the filmmaking. Like, what are we looking at as far as that goes?
Just about anything
Just
you
the
like.
way that they presented the storyline.
Presented the story, you know, cinematography, music, effects, all that kind of stuff. What brought it all together? Like, you know.
Okay, so one thing I'll say is like I watched Dracula for the first time today,
Wow.
and I was getting kind of confused about certain plot points where I did have to kind of look it up on my phone because I was like, why is he sort of like a wolf also? Is he supposed to be like a werewolf too? You know, like certain parts didn't make sense to me. And so I was like, all right, I just gotta make sure I'm not missing something here. But with American Werewolf, it was pretty clear what was going on. You know, strangers showing up in a pub, the patrons are all acting super sketchy, and like you already know, like something's up in that town. And then he gets attacked, his friend. I don't know. Can we do spoilers at all in here?
Yeah, it's like 40 years old.
True.
We're
True
good.
that.
We're good.
But yeah, so like I just feel like they set that whole tone really well and it moves the story along pretty well that I would probably have to give this to American Werewolf because I would get really confused in certain points. And I'm like, why is Dracula doing like why are they doing this? Like the scene where what's her friend's name? Lucy gets bit. And there's just this, it's a very sexual too. Like there's just like a lot of like, don't watch it with kids around. Just a heads up. It's not when you
Lots
want your
of
kids to
boobs.
look at.
All right.
Yeah.
So you go with Werewolf in London and sex on screen is bad for Megan. Okay, gotcha. So we're gonna head up to Brian's corner.
All right. So with this film, it's with both of these films, they have great directors. Francis Ford Coppola has his amazing style he brings to this movie. It is visually, it's just you could probably hang each frame of this movie on a wall, like on an art piece. So I think I'm gonna have to give it to Francis Ford Coppola just because of the directing and stuff. The score is also fantastic. Although I like the soundtrack and like those like moon songs that come out in American Werewolf. I love that. The score here is just super powerful in Dracula. Along with Francis Ford Coppola, is just one of the greatest directors we've had. So I think Dracula wins filmmaking for me.
Mia, I have a feeling you have a lot to say.
This is going to be the one that if I do ramble, it might be this one, but I'm going to try and go as fast as possible.
It's okay. It's okay. Just grab my drink.
Yeah. Brian brought up sound. I think Dracula's score is beautiful and wonderful. But it kind of sounds repetitive. Like after halfway through, I'm like, ooh, there it is again. And I liked it. But bro, that music in American Werewolf in London is so good. The classic songs when he dies at the end and it's like ba 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 da, I'm just like, yes, I love it.
I didn't
David
expect
hates that part.
at all.
Oh, it's great. It's like it makes the movie
It's such
for
a
me, like
serious
the ending.
moment, and then
Yeah, I love it. Blue Moon. I'm just like, yes, that's the perfect way to go into it after like her scream. I love that. I think that might be the only thing that I prefer in the filmmaking over Dracula is I think the soundtrack and the music is way better. But Dracula's is great. I think that also a big nod to the special effects, that transformation that Rick Baker does of the wolf, insane, beautifully done. A lot of people like to talk about, oh, well, the Howling did this and blah, 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 blah. Dude, you can't take anything away from that scene. He does it all in the daylight. There's no shadows. There's no trickery. It's insane. It's insane. It's the 80s. This is insane. So anyway, that also to the effects though, Gary Oldman when he's like the old pale Dracula, ooh, he's so spooky and everything is so good about the shadow work. I don't know how they did that. Francis Ford Coppola is just like a genius whenever it comes to framing certain shots. I just, like Brian said, an art piece. I felt like I was watching an art movie. I was confused on the wolf thing certain times. I was like, why is he a wolf now? Is he like, they're going to be a werewolf thing tied in there now too? But then they eventually did say that he can turn into rats. He can dissipate into fog, he can do whatever. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess wolf, whatever.
like
Why aren't you a bat? But
like he's in charge of the creatures of the night or something like that.
yeah, I was like, okay, whatever. I think they just wanted to like have him like have a wolf by his side because that would probably look cool, and that's how they tied it in there or something like that. But yeah, I think that filmmaking, Francis Ford Coppola is a genius. I don't know what he's like as an actual person, but his cinematography, his work, his finished films are masterpieces. They're beautiful. And I could ramble about this forever, but clearly and I just watched it. I literally just finished it this morning. I started it last night and I finished it this morning and I'm obsessed. I'm going to watch it over and over and over again. So yeah, for sure. Dracula for 100 million other reasons, but you know.
All right. Well, you don't know what Francis Ford Coppola is like, but I'm going to throw to someone who does. Tony.
Yeah, me and him, we go way back. Yeah, I mean, Dracula, again, just like the gothic glamour and the costumes and the use of like shadows, just like you were saying, right? It kind of puts you in that spot, right? And it just, I think, there's a lot of symbolism in that as well with the blood and the animals and so on. And, it feels like it just like you were saying, every scene just seems like so much care has been and thought have been put into each one. On the other hand, Werewolf was, it did something incredibly difficult. And that was marrying horror with comedy and keeping like a really good pace of it and doing it in such a way that it felt like it just really fit the way it should have been done, right? And so when you're, David's in the middle of his change scene into a werewolf, you hear the bones cracking, all the hair coming out, and he makes a joke right in the middle of it. It's fantastic, right? And
I didn't mean to call you Meatloaf, Jack.
Yeah, exactly, right? But it happens again and again, right? So, when he meets Jack, during his visions, they're always making jokes, right? And it's that very dark humor. I thought it paced very well. So for that, I would have to give it the heads up to Werewolf and John Landis.
I like the points you made there with the blending of comedy and horror. Not always easy, not always well done. Yeah. Liv, you're up.
Okay, I kind of had a lot of the same points. It is hard because Francis Ford Coppola is known for being like one of the best filmmakers of all time. I would not say it's necessarily for Dracula though. I do think that Dracula is like so spectacularly put together. I think it's an incredible movie. I think it's maybe a little longer than it needs to be. American Werewolf in London is kept to like a really short runtime. I think it's like pretty much a clean hour and a half. And again, the blending of comedy and horror, and it never really seems to take away from either. I also think that American Werewolf in London does a really good job of like the Jaws effect, where you never really get a good look at the werewolf in its full form. Like I could not sit down and draw you a picture of this entire werewolf because we never really see it. And if you do see a lot of it, it's like from really far away, like in the tunnel in the subway. And also it does such a good job of like every time you're like, I know where this is going, it completely subverts that. With everything from like the music cues, the like calm, relaxing music during the werewolf transformation scene, of course, but also like really loudly playing CCR as David's just walking around the house being like, I'm bored. I'm not hungry. I'm still not hungry. And it's just like put together in a weird, chaotic way that I've never really seen another movie do. I just feel like it's such a unique viewing experience where when I show American Werewolf in London to people for the first time, they're constantly just like, what is happening in this movie? Like I'm here for it, but what is happening? Like also the dream sequence where his entire family gets gunned down by Nazi werewolves. Like I'm not entirely sure why that's happening, but I really enjoyed it.
What symbolic purpose is this?
Yeah. So I just think that American Werewolf in London does a really good job of kind of like keeping you on the edge of your seat, whereas Dracula, it's beautiful, but I mean, I think that everyone kind of knows what happens in Dracula, and it's a little harder to put a unique spin on that, unless you're like changing the plot.
I had no idea what was going to happen in Dracula. Like the whole time I was like, I don't know anything. I know he's like a vampire that likes women.
Yeah.
I loved it.
He's
I
in
was
love
like,
with the one woman and obsessed. But
I
also,
thought
I
he
also-
was going to make it at the end too. I was like, why did he die? I was so mad about that. It's like, you can't kill him.
I
So,
mean, I also
don't
might
know.
just feel this way because Dracula, like I read it when I was 16 and it has been my entire personality ever since then. I have a tattoo for it. I named a cat after Quincy. I've seen like every version of Dracula, so maybe that's why I feel that way.
Yeah, as somebody that never got into the vampire phase except for Twilight when I was 13, you know, I didn't know anything about it. So it was a good payoff for me, but I
Yeah,
never knew anything about
it stands
so.
to reason, Liv, you know what's going to happen if you've seen every single Dracula movie and read the book. I think, yeah, you've got the leg up on people on that one. But your points are valid with a werewolf. This was funny because they're both 180s of each other from filmmaking style to everything in between. I gotta go with I think this is like next to The Godfather, Frances Ford Coppola's next best film. I know Apocalypse Now fans are going to be like, what? But and then this was it. He fell off the cliff after this, really. I mean, there was nothing to him, but he delivered on this one. This the imagery, I know we kind of glaze over it in a way, but like, I mean, the imagery was just beautiful. Everything was thought provoking, and lots of blood. I'm not gonna go. I mean, everybody kind of, by the time it gets to me, there's nothing left to say, but I'm just gonna say Dracula. Thanks, everybody. All right, so we're moving on to characters, and for this one we're gonna start with Tony.
Characters. David Kessler. So let's just start with Werewolf first. So David Kessler, the innocent American Yank backpacker, right? His friend Jack, clueless, walking through the moors, end up getting Jack ends up getting eaten right away, but still plays a major part of the story. So I thought, and he made some really good cameos throughout the movie, right? So you really, and again, it's not getting that full image, just like you were saying before, right? I think it was you, Liv. You said like you don't see everything all in bright light. You see, him in shadows and a little floppy piece of skin that you can't take your eyes off as he's talking, right? So I thought that was great. And then the doctor, I thought he played a really good character. It was like, someone who's like, kind of, science based, and this is all ridiculous, but it was proved wrong at the end. But Dracula's Dracula. I think I think that takes that'll take the cake, right? And then Gary Oldman playing Dracula, just magic, right? So and all the other characters we know, right? But Dracula and Van Helsing, classic combo. So I'll have to give this one to Dracula.
All right, Megan.
All right, I think that I'd give this one to American Werewolf in London because I just loved the dynamic. Like, even though I didn't get to, like, we were watching it, they're close, they're good buds and stuff, but even though he dies right off the beginning, Jack does, they still manage to have that dynamic throughout with all of the dream sequences and things. I don't know, Van Helsing and Dracula, he was my favorite. He was just so blunt about like the stuff that would just come out of his mouth. Like, what was it? Oh, we're gonna do an autopsy. He was like, no, we're just gonna cut her head off and take her heart out. Just so, like, the way he delivers some of the lines that he does. And I guess some reading that I also did was that the actor was told to kind of play with the character because the way it was written, apparently he talked a lot. I never read the book, so I can't speak too much on the book, but he got to kind of make that character his own. But I didn't feel much for a lot of the other characters. I felt kind of partial to the little duo in American Werewolf.
All right, Brian.
So with Dracula, I liked how there was just all these great actors behind these characters. But as I was watching it, I was just like thinking of all the different portrayals of these characters I've seen before. It didn't really feel like they had their own characters. It feels like everyone was just trying to play characters we've seen before, whether in film or TV or literature. So with American Werewolf, I just liked how there was all these unique, pretty like kooky characters that fit well with this like horror comedic tone of the film. Jack is hilarious. I mean, even as he's a corpse, he's just like torturing David, making comments to him. Nurse Price, I thought, was a great love interest. Dr. Hirsch, I like how he's kind of takes interest in David's dilemma, and he goes to interact with some of the best characters. I think are actually the Slaughter Lamb patrons. Kind of give this movie a whole character to itself. So I have to go with American Werewolf.
All right, Liv.
Okay, this one is hard. Okay, I will say in American Werewolf in London, obviously I like love all the characters, like the two like American representatives, and one of them has like the dumbest, goofiest voice for some reason. I love Jack and David when Jack has shown up and he's all flayed and he's still talking about Debbie Kleinman and how she cried at his funeral and ran off into some other guy's arms. Like, I do think all of this is great for a horror film. But Dracula is very near and dear to my heart. It's been one of my favorite things since I was a small child. And also, I feel kind of the opposite, where like I've seen so many versions and read it, and like like I'm used to all these different versions of these same sets of characters, but I think there's something so special about the way they were directed in Coppola's, and I didn't really get that until I had seen it on Halloween at like a big showing of it so I saw it in a large crowd, and that was a moment where I realized that like it's kind of melodramatic and funny, and that's something that I haven't really seen from Dracula before. Everyone like plays it really straight, and they're like, no, this is like one of the most classic horror pieces of all time, one of the earliest after Frankenstein and Dorian Gray, and so it's always just played straight into that. But this one is so over the top, and I think that like Van Helsing is really memorable. I think that Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, he plays it so like bumbling and stupid. Obviously Gary Oldman is great. And I remember walking out of this, and 3 of my friends who were with me all turned to me and they were like, didn't you have a cat that you named Quincy, I get it now. That guy was the best. Like, and I think
Awesome.
it's just because of the way they were directed in this one.
All right. So Dracula?
Yeah.
All right, Mia.
I honestly don't know which way I'm gonna go for this one, so I'm gonna have to talk it out. I wish that we saw more of Jack and David before Jack got killed off, because their dynamic, they get off, I like your sheep. Like, just, I love this character so much. Immediately, I'm obsessed with him. And then it's like, oh, 5 minutes later, he's dead. I mean, he comes back in, but dude, that sheep line, I'm obsessed with it. I actually got to meet David Naughton. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. Last year, and we were the only ones at his table. We went to like a little small horror con. He was super cool. He looks exactly the same, just has gray hair now, like same haircut, everything. It was really wild. And then later on, he came into the lobby of the hotel, and we like showed him where the bathrooms was, and like talked to him a little bit more. So that was like really wild, because that's one of the movies, American Werewolf in London, David watches like once a week, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, he really does. So it was just like, you just told him where the bathrooms was. It's just so weird. So so I guess like having that memory makes me more sentimental to that character as well. I think that as great of actors as Keanu Reeves is, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, I think they weren't that great of actors in Dracula. My personal opinion, I've seen more movies that they've been in, and I've just seen better work from them. Gary Oldman, however, is insanely intense, so well done. Every single syllable movement is very calculated, but not in a rehearsed way. And I also feel that the woman that played Lucy, I really believed that that seduction type of girly humor, whatever, that is who she was. And I really believed that. And I know that acting is not really a category, but it's a factor into the characters. I think that really helped for their characters. I can't get over how good Gary Oldman was in this film. But I just don't think it's enough for him to carry the other very well established and well-known actors as not as great of performances. Like, I think Anthony Hopkins was funny. I think he had some great one-liners, but if he wouldn't have done those one-liners, I wouldn't have probably ever remembered that it was him that did that role. Same with Keanu Reeves. Like, it was like, oh, it's Keanu Reeves, but it was just kind of like, meh, not into it. So that made me not love their characters as much. So I think honestly, I'm gonna probably go with American Werewolf in London for this. I like their sheep.
All right.
Who had a better
I
English
should have
accent?
mentioned the fact that all of the other characters are the ones that he kills off that just haunt him afterwards. They should get a little shout out.
Yeah.
Tony, what'd you say?
Who's got a better English accent, Keanu Reeves or Kevin Costner?
Well, I'm gonna take the floor now, and I'm just gonna destroy Keanu Reeves, because he almost, in my opinion, single-handedly destroyed this film with that performance. It was that bad. I know, Liv, you said it was bumbling, and no, it was bad. And I love Keanu Reeves. I do.
Yeah, he's better than that.
He's better than that, and he let us down. It was when I watched, I'm like, how did he get this part? Like, it was terrible. And again, I'm gonna say it again, I like the guy, I mean, but this was not his best work, and he admitted as much, which is the least he could do. And the reason why is because I love this movie so much, and when he's on, I'm like, that's it. So
They almost had Johnny Depp.
yeah, and I mean, imagine. But then also the other thing I hate about, and this has nothing to do with his talent level, is his gray hair. Like, who did that? That looks like a student film. I mean, it was terrible considering the production value of this movie. His gray hair looked amateur. It was, anyways, that's not character. That's not his
Who
fault.
approved this?
So between that, and I remember, it's funny because I remember when Dracula came out in theaters, and I remember Gary Oldman was playing Dracula. I was so pissed off because at the time really didn't know much about Gary Oldman, and I was like, this is who gets Dracula this. And I was like, I remember at the time, I was like, should have been Mel Gibson. And anyways, so hindsight being what it is, and I all the love I have for Mel Gibson withstanding, I mean, Gary Oldman just destroys this film in an amazing way. It was genius. And I mean, just from the beginning where he's like the warrior in that outfit and with that hair and that beard, I mean, he looks like he's 200 pounds heavier than when he is Dracula, and it's just a presence that he has, and just the dynamic, or the just how, you know, his acting from that character, like, you know, the origins of Dracula, it's how it transcended into what he ended up becoming, this frail old man. That was like, that's amazing. That's not just costumes. That's you know, I do agree with what something Mia said. I do wish in American Werewolf in London those guys had a little bit more time. You know, they definitely deserved it. You know, but that was back in a time where an hour and a half was what you were aiming for. Now it seems like it's like 2 hours and a half for every movie. So maybe
Oh
it
my
was
God, yeah.
maybe it was a good thing. But anyways, I'm going to give it to Dracula, despite Keanu Reeves trying to throw a monkey wrench into that. But anyways, we move on to scare factor. And for this one, we'll start off with Liv.
American Werewolf in London. I don't think that Dracula is scary at all. I think that it's beautiful. I don't think there are like a couple of moments in Dracula the story generally that I think are like frightening, but otherwise it's kind of, I would say, more like of a gothic piece than it is a horror piece. And you obviously have elements of horror with the monster, and it's very bloody, very scary, very sexual, things that are very common in horror. But American Werewolf, I think the laughs make the scares better because you kind of have like a wider range of emotion. And also I'm always a big fan of body horror, and that whole transformation sequence is just so good. And Dracula, I walk out of it being like, that is beautiful. Like that was gorgeous. And American Werewolf, I'm like, that was like funny but really unsettling. So
All right.
American Werewolf.
All right. What exactly is body horror?
Body horror is
David
like,
Cronenberg.
yeah, it's like the body itself kind of
Oh, okay.
getting torn apart and reformed in different ways. So like Cronenberg, The Thing, anything with like
The
a lot of
Fly.
body morphing. Yeah.
Which Chrome? Yeah, okay. So I was overthinking it, but okay, cool. All right, Brian, go.
All right, so yeah, I have kind of like a similar thought about Dracula where it's like it's not that scary. It's more of just like a great romance story with some scary imagery. American Werewolf, I think, is like one of the scariest movies ever made. There's so many like nightmarish sequences where they get attacked on the moors, the dream sequence with David's weird demonic looking face, where his bed's in the middle of the woods. It's just all these weird, unsettling images. The attack on the house, the Nazi demon soldiers. Just so many disturbing sequences. But there is that comedy aspect. What I like about that is that I think the comedy like lets you drop your guard down again, and then the movie hits you with another piece of horror that's like really scary. So then you're just kind of like put down and then brought back up again, and it's just like, I think as a for scare factor as a movie and in general, it's just one of the best. So American Werewolf.
I like how every once in a while, like Nazi soldiers are mentioned, and it's just the most random thing. And someone who had never seen the movie watching this would be like, "What the?" And in the movie, it's random too, so it doesn't. But it's pretty funny. Megan, I feel like I haven't talked to you in a while. You're up.
I was actually going to say like a similar thing that Brian said, where it's like, so they make you laugh, you kind of like you feeling at ease, and then all of a sudden it's like, bah! You're like, but Dracula seemed like they were trying too hard for me. Like it had its moments. I wasn't a fan of the baby getting eaten by the wives. That was cringy. But for the most part, it wasn't really scary for me. Definitely would give this one to American Werewolf in London.
All right. Tony.
Yeah, so for me, you're right. Like for in Dracula, a baby getting eaten alive, that that would have been like the scariest scene, right? And
I was like,
yeah, yeah. I like when you read that, I was like, oh my god, like what would that play out like on the screen, right? But I think it was just Keanu Reeves just screaming in the end of it, right?
like the baby's like crying in the background.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, like really creepy, like especially for a book that was written well over 100 years ago, right? I guess it was taboo back then, right? Well, it is even now. Children getting eaten. Well, anytime, I guess.
Some states you can eat babies.
But yeah, when it comes to scare factor, it's hands down Werewolf, right? Like, yeah, again, the transformation scene, all those surprise attacks. Yeah, like when he's running through the forest, a little bit too much nudity for my liking, but seeing himself on the bed and then
I like how you're saying that him running in the forest is too much nudity, but there's like 2 10-minute sex scenes and another part where he's running naked. That's fine.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, they show a little bit too much frontal for my liking. Yeah, but yeah, I thought still I think it still plays into that whole scene and the scare factor too, right? And those jump scares are really just when again being attacked by the Nazi werewolves, and then you think it's over, and then boom, the werewolf comes out again and starts attacking the nurse, right? Yeah, it's just hands down, it's got to be Werewolf.
All right, Mia.
I guess this is where I turn the tables, because I don't think anything in Werewolf is scary at all. I'm not taking anything away from that transformation. That is horrifying, but I'm more intrigued and interested that I am sitting there being scared. I'm not scared by many things. Jason and I talk about this a lot when it comes to this category. It's not very scary. I think honestly the comedy takes away it, like you guys' points where it made things scarier. I think it makes things cheesier, and it makes it not feel as serious because it's a very comedic film, whereas Dracula's very serious, you're on one note the whole time, and it's drama, it's dramatic. So when something is scary, it's not to be taken lightly. And just going back to Gary Oldman, when you see him and he's that got whatever these things are going on, that was kind of comedic though. I think his hairdo, I just kept seeing the guy in Little Nicky when he's got the boobs on top of his head. That's what I kept seeing the whole time. Granted, I know that was before that technically, but yeah, I was like, can't do this. However, creepy hands, no, don't want to see it, don't want to deal with it. Yeah, there was a lot of things he did, very calculated again, that I was just like, I don't like that. It made me very uncomfortable to watch him move in a certain way, and it gave me the chills. I didn't like it. Also, the baby scene, very uncomfortable. There was a lot of times where if you're really into that film and you're sitting and you're dealing with the thoughts that somebody like Winona Ryder just totally threw away the safe, nice love for somebody like this, when she knows, she's like, you murdered Lucy and I love you. It's like, oh, that's fucked up. That sucks. And that's another part of like the scare factor to it. So again, going back to the hands, as soon as I saw him in Dracula's castle, and Keanu was like, oh, and when he's shaving his neck, I'm like, what?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That shaving scene. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, there was just way more times in Dracula I was sitting there going, I don't like whatever's going on right there. I'm not a fan. Than I was in America. I was never doing that in American Werewold in London. I was like, what's gonna happen next? Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's super cool. But I was never scared. And in Dracula, I was like, don't like that. So definitely Dracula.
Guys licking razors. No, thank you.
Yeah.
So all right, so good for Mia standing on her own on that one. Hairy palms, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Gary Oldman was a genius in that film. I think like in this day and age, maybe he'd probably get like an Oscar nod for that one. But
Cancel.
huh?
He'd be canceled, I think.
Cancel. I so with Dracula, like I mean, yeah, again, okay, so I don't want to sound redundant, but like I mean, not a lot scares me. So I'm going to give this to Werewolf for one reason, that when I first saw it, I was really really young, and I didn't even see it. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. to watch this with my brother, and because it was on TV, and that's the only way you could see things back when I grew up. But anyway, so, and I remember it was like, you know, human transformation was just something hard for me to really, you know, just watch. That was the last thing I kind of broached, I think, in my love for horror. And that transformation scene wasn't as bad though as that subway scene where you just see the damn thing creep up just and then they that was brilliant. That was really really sweet. But I will give, like, you know, a lot of love for Gary Oldman and the creep factor that he did. But one thing I do want to acknowledge is the howl of the werewolf in American Werewolf in London is the greatest howl ever. I love it's a howl and a scream, and it just when they're in the moors there, and it's just, that was awesome. That I wish that scene kind of played out a little bit longer, even, because it was just so awesome. I love that howl. And yeah, so I'm gonna give it to Werewolf. All right, Tony, kills.
Kills, geez. So Dracula had a lot of blood, lots of blood, right? Babies in sacks, more blood, and but I think that's where it kind of stops, right? I feel like where, you know, it was a little bit too clean, besides all the blood splatter. Whereas like in Werewolf, there was just, it was a lot more raw, right? So, you know, Jack just getting torn apart, and it felt like it just lasted forever, right? Usually a kill scene, it's like a slash, maybe 2 slashes and it's done. This felt like it was just going on, and you could hear him screaming, and, you know, David's running away. And then in the subway, I mean, that was fantastic as well, right? And then the whole ending. I mean, there's just so much going on there at the ending. Piccadilly Circus is just nonstop. If someone fell, they fell hard and they smashed their face, right? So I'd have to give this one to Werewolf again, because it was just so much more raw and so much more variety of kills, I guess you'd say. And it just it last long, and it was really uncomfortable.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, in Dracula, it was like the people got decapitated and there was a lot of blood, but I just don't remember much of any of the deaths in that movie. Where in American Werewolf, you do have, of course, Rick Baker's amazing work, but it's brutal. It's just people are getting ripped to shreds, heads are being bitten clean off. The Piccadilly Circus scene at the end, it's like not even the werewolf it directly murdering people. It's like accidents are happening, people are slamming to their cars, they're swerving out of the way, crashing. That was just like so brutal. So I was like, all that stuff I remember. Dracula, I'm kind of like, there was a lot of red blood and that's it. Like it looked like Gatorade half the time. So to me, it's American Werewolf.
All right, Liv.
Yeah, I mean, for the same reasons, I have to give it to American Werewolf. I think all the deaths I remember in Dracula, I just remember it because I've seen every version and read it so many times, and not because like this version in particular really did anything for it. But like the whole scene in Piccadilly Square, anytime David is going on his like killing rampages in werewolf mode, it's just so memorable every single time. I feel like there's not really much I can add, except actually, no, David's death itself is like incredible, iconic. Like I mean, I know someone brought it up earlier, but like the hard cut from Nurse Price crying in the alley and then the shot of his naked body at the end, and then just cut to black, really loud, fast paced, like happy kind of sounding music. That's such a special death to me in all of horror. Like one of the most memorable character deaths in the entire genre to me.
Wow. So that's a heavy, heavy praise right there. Awesome. All right, Mia.
Yeah, definitely American Werewolf in London. Dracula's great because we got some beheadings and it's not necessarily a kill, but when she jumps off of the castle or whatever into the river in the very beginning, that's just really powerful and beautiful. But it's not like, oh yeah, that's what I want to see. And American Werewolf in London gives you that for sure. Everybody kind of capped on the ending there in Piccadilly Square. It's just pure chaos and I love it. And as much as I want to love Dracula in every single category, it just doesn't stand up. But when she dies and that blood comes from either end, Lucy dies and it's just like, psh, I was like, bro, that was cool. But it wasn't really like, didn't make up for the whole movie as a whole. So yeah, Werewolf.
Megan.
All right, so like building off what she was just saying, like Lucy's death is the one that I remember the most because it's just so like her head just chopped, get a scene of it just flying across the screen, and then they're almost kind of like holding it over near her body towards the end in like a different shot. But American Werewolf, it's just gruesome, it's grotesque. This like the whole slaughter scene in the theater, like first of all, they're in a porn theater. And I was like, did these really exist back then? Like, oh my God, learn something new every day. And then he's going through his transformation. The one guy kind of like comes up on him like, you good, dude? And but then he literally turns into a werewolf and just massacres everybody. And they're all gruesome and bloody. And like Tony was saying, like it's a variety of kills. So I have to give it to American Werewolf.
Nice. I'm gonna keep mine short. I'm gonna go with Werewolf as well. My only knock is I love when people get eaten alive on films, and I feel like it was underused in this film for a werewolf film. That's
Jack
my
was
only-
kind of the only one.
Huh?
Jack
Yeah,
was kind of like the only one. That
yeah.
was sad. Like he's
Yeah.
running, you're like, go back for your buddy. It was so sad, but that's the
Yeah.
only time they make
Where's
use
it?
of that really.
Yeah, but Werewolf. All right, so we move on to Antagonist. And for this one, we're gonna start off with Mia.
Okay, so you've got somebody that doesn't want to be a werewolf. He's on vacation with his bestest pal, and now this is his reality, and he doesn't want to do it, and he's aware towards the end, and it still happens, and it sucks, but Dracula has a vendetta. His bride to be, or maybe I don't think they were married. I don't remember. I was like half drunk when I started this movie last night. Anyway, she dies, and he's just like, I will have my revenge on the church. That scene, I was like, oh, I knew I was in for it because when Gary Oldman like sees Winona Ryder like dead, I was like, whoa, he's going off the handles. It was freaking awesome. And yeah, he can change people. He has the strength of 20 bodies. He's got these hot brides worshiping him, and he doesn't care because he's got another girl that he wants, and he's evil because he wants to be evil, and he does whatever he wants whenever he wants, including buying 10 houses around London. So yeah, Dracula.
So Dracula for his real estate savvy. Gotcha.
Dude, yeah, he
All
don't
right.
give a crap.
All right, Megan, you're up.
I agree, actually. Like there wasn't if you're gonna talk about an antagonist, you really got to give it to Dracula because he antagonizes throughout the whole movie. I mean, he takes Jonathan as soon as he realizes that he's marrying the reincarnate of his former wife or whatever, and enslaves him. What was the name of the guy in the beginning that Jonathan took over for? That was like the original
Renfield.
Yeah, he drove him insane, and he's still going, master, master. And you know, it's I'm coming for your girl, Mr. Steal Your Girl. Meanwhile, he's got his brides at home that are just feeding off of Jonathan. He's just causing hell everywhere he goes. So I got to give it to Dracula.
All right, Liv.
Well, Dracula.
All right, Brian.
Dracula.
Keep going.
He's obviously like already one of the most iconic horror characters of all time. There's been 7 billion versions of him, and Gary Oldman does an incredible job. And he is like, in addition to all the other things that have already been said, him also like sneaking into the room of the women in the middle of the night, and everyone is like, what is this strange melody that has come over these women? And they like have to have a specialist who's like borderline a lunatic come in and solve what's happening for them. And in American Werewolf in London, I don't really know that I would say there is an antagonist. Like, David is the
Yeah.
protagonist. I know he turns into a werewolf and like the werewolf is the one causing problems, but like, I mean, if I had to pick an antagonist in that movie, I would almost say it's like maybe the town that he got attacked in collectively.
It's
didn't
almost like a
do anything to help.
it's like a virus, right? It's that unknown that the town protects kind of thing.
That's
like,
what
or
I
that,
was thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
Thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So
Or like
I
when he kills people and they're all like antagonizing him, saying commit suicide, commit suicide. I mean, that could be a factor.
yeah, but again, it's like there's no one real antagonist in American Werewolf. I feel like it's hard to maybe give that one a point for this category because of that.
All right.
Mhm.
Tony, you look like you got something to add to that, what we were just kind of touching on.
Yeah. Does Dracula have brides or does he have wives? I've always been confused, right?
I
I
think
only
it's like the
refer
same
to
thing in
it-
this.
Semantics.
The arguments they have.
It's concubines.
Yeah, there's
so-
an old movie called Brides of Dracula. That's why I say brides, because
Yeah.
that was like a universal one or something like that.
This one it's almost more than clear. Dracula is like the leader of the bad guys, right? And like in any movie, whether it's what's that one with Fred Savage, Little Monsters or something like that, right? Dracula is going to be the leader of the bad guys, right? But yeah, werewolf. It's true, right?
Okay.
You could just say it's the werewolf, but it's really David, and it's not just him. It's like all his victims that are egging him on to commit suicide. So it doesn't really, it's not really clear who the real antagonist is, right? Is it everyone? Is it no one? Is it the wolf? Is it just him?
It's up to interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it makes it, it's almost, again, with everything else in that movie, right? It's a little bit mysterious. It doesn't give you the full picture, and then it kind of cuts away and leaves you thinking, right? But Dracula's Dracula, so I'll have to give it to Dracula.
All right. Ryan.
Yeah, so with American Werewolf, I like that David, like I love werewolf stories, and I like that, he is wreaking terror on this town and everything, but he's more like an antagonist to himself as he is to everyone else, where like Dracula is like he's ready to take over the world. Like if you don't stop him, like the stakes are way higher in Dracula because of how powerful he is. And the movie, I mean, it's so unfair because it's just like you do have one of the greatest villains, and again, not just movies, not just books. It's like across mediums, Dracula is one of the greatest villains of all time. So, and this is like the third, in my opinion, second or third best Dracula performance. So I have to go with Dracula.
All right. Yeah. It's funny because when Liv said there's been like 7 billion Dracula performances, I was like, Gary Oldman does like 1 billion alone in this film. But so he's the alpha, right? Like, I mean, that's the alpha villain. And I think it's this ranked, I think, the second greatest villain of all time. I'll leave you to look up who number 1 is. Actually, he could have been number 1 too, and I got it wrong. But anyways, regardless, my point is Dracula's pretty damn impressive. And I like his style. Like he goes after the ladies and he chucks the men, like he gets them out of the way. I gotta admire that from like, just just a
He's a man who knows what he wants.
exactly. And from a guy's standpoint, I kind of admire him for that. And
That's right.
huh?
I would like to put in a fun fact about that.
Do it.
Bram Stoker was most likely gay. There's like a lot of letters that are good references for that between him and Oscar Wilde. But he ended up writing Dracula after Oscar Wilde had been imprisoned for being gay. And so Dracula was kind of Bram Stoker's way of fighting homoerotic feelings within him, but some of it still kind of leaks out, especially with like Dracula claiming Jonathan Harker is his when the brides come for him and stuff like that. But that's why it is, or partially why it's like so very sexual and very like chasing after all the women so aggressively. So
I knew
just
you
a
were
little fun fact.
I knew you were gonna say something like that. Look, he's a guy for me that I can relate to. But a good point. I didn't know that at all. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, no, but that for all those reasons. But it's Dracula. I mean, it doesn't get better than that as far as a villain. And the cool thing with Dracula, not so much in this film, but I mean, we've seen all different. Like sometimes he's sympathetic, sometimes he's like you could kind of play with that character and you could take them different directions. Whereas like a lot of main antagonists that are so iconic, they're one way and maybe they'll have a turn at the end or something like that of the film. But I like how Dracula could be very, very multi-layered. All right, so
Can I make one point to that though? Like it's like yeah, like for me, like the greatest antagonist is like or bad guys, like someone who you feel like you could sympathize or you can empathize with them, right? Like they're not just like you said, they're not just like a caricature of something that's pure evil. It's like, yeah, I would do that too, right? Like, what would I do in that situation?
Well, and I mean, this film does lend itself to that, like when he, loses the love of his life, but like he so quickly destroys the church and in a malicious way that you kind of don't really have a lot of time to feel for him. It's like really quick. All right, so we're moving on to new category territory, and we're gonna dissect the posters. I'm not going to dissect it. We're just going to say which one we like better. And we're going to start off with Brian.
Dracula has a really cool poster. I like that statue face, and then you have like some of the main characters at the bottom. But I always love the posters that leave a lot more to the imagination. That aren't so doesn't just have your villain right then and there. So with American Werewolf, I do love the two main characters kind of just looking off to the side, and you're just like, what are they staring at? Like, what is gonna happen in this movie? And there's that great shot of the moon. And I think it depicts one of the greatest scenes that always scared me when I was young, was the whole that Moors moment. So I think I'm gonna go with the American Werewolf. I think that's really like probably the scarier poster to me.
All right, Mia.
I already know what both of these look like, but I just wanted to see if it says. I don't think it does. Oh yeah, I guess down at the bottom. I think that both of these posters are kind of like boring. I don't think Dracula, just based off of my personal experience, I never watched this film because I never thought it looked interesting. I thought it looked like just dated and cheesy. I'm like, oh, that 90s Dracula film, whatever, until I was forced to watch it to be on the show. I was like, oh, I love this movie so much. But yeah, the poster is just kind of like, oh, it's a Dracula movie, but that's it. Like for me, it never made me want to watch the film. That being said, American Werewolf in London's poster does not make me want to watch the movie either. However, it's done more in a vintage-ish style. It doesn't, like, you don't look at it and you go, oh, that's for sure from the 80s. The only reason you say, oh, that's for sure from the 80s, because you know that the film's from the 80s because it was part of your childhood or whatever. But what I was looking at was to see if it says a John Landis film, because I love Animal House. It's one of my favorite films, and John Landis did that. And if you were to see that, like if it would say a film from John Landis, and you'd be like, the guy that did Animal House, he's making a werewolf film, I think that would do a better job at making you maybe want to watch the film. But I'll go with American Werewolf in London simply because I never watched the masterpiece that Dracula was, because the marketing and the poster and the VHS cover was just not exciting enough for me.
Liv.
I agree a little bit that I think that both posters are kind of mundane. The Dracula poster, I had to look it up to even remember what it looked like before we started. The only thing that I think is good about the American Werewolf one is I think that I feel like promotional material tends to offer too much information usually, and I think that this one is good with misdirection for putting both David and Jack together in the poster, very alive looking, very like buddy duo looking, only for Jack to then die in the first 8 minutes of the film.
All right. So Werewolf. Yeah. Tony.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's on the original poster, but it's what I see here. Mia, you're mentioning like from the director of Animal House, right? And
does it say that on there? Oh yeah, from the director of Animal House comes a different kind of animal. Yeah, I totally missed
the
that.
director of Animal House comes a different kind of, right? It's like, sounds kind of like a joke, right? But maybe that plays to the humor that is part of this movie as well, right? And you're right, yeah, it kind of misdirects you, misguides you, thinking that these are the two people that are going to make it to the end and defeat the werewolf, right? But the story is completely different. And it doesn't show them like all made up, like in a cover, like you see in other movies. It's just like a still from the movie, and they're this like in terrible shape, right? They're soaking wet, cold. The Dracula one, I like. It almost like it doesn't need to give that much information away. Everybody knows the story, right? Or everybody thinks they know the story, because most people have not read the book; they've more like watched previous movies, right? But it's got that gothic element to it as well, right? Jeez, this one's a difficult one. But I'll say Dracula. I just like the way the gargoyles look there, and the wolves with the blood lettering. I think that looks fantastic.
All right, Megan.
Okay, so I definitely agree. Like both of them are pretty simplistic. There's nothing that really super catches your attention. I like the crest that Dracula has with the werewolf gargoyle like things. But I also never really watched it because it just didn't have anything that was really eye-catching other than the crest, really. So I'd go with American Werewolf because I like that it almost kind of puts you in the movie with the way that they did the poster. And they definitely do a misdirect, because I thought that Jack was going to make it a lot longer. Okay, I did not know I was going to die that early. And I was really sad. I was like, we're going to at least make it through part of the movie before he dies. Like to the middle. We're going to build up their relationship, and then it's going to be so heartbreaking when it happens. And it definitely misdirected me. But yeah, I would go with American Werewolf. It just caught my attention more.
Ryan. Ryan?
Yeah.
You're up.
Ooh, the posters. Are we still on posters?
Yeah. Did you go?
Yeah, I thought I did.
Oh, I don't have you. I don't have your score here.
Oh, didn't I? Okay.
I think you went right before me.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. You did. You went with Werewolf. I apologize. Oh my. Okay. And we have some people switching screens on me here too. All right. So so everybody handed in their votes, right? Or did we get? Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry, getting a little bit of technical issues. You guys switched around and it threw me.
Because I got a phone call like a second ago, and I was like, no, not right now.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna give it to Werewolf of London, although I do like the kind of like, Dracula, the classic look of it. It's like the classic tale, the classic look. I like that clean look. It's kind of does it a weird disservice. I get that, like, because it's such a visual film and it's such a, static kind of picture. But and Werewolf of London basically looks like a screen grab, but it worked. I think the only reason why I'm giving it to Werewolf, I think, is because I had years to work with it. I had like seen it in video stores all those years, and like kind of just got into my head a little bit better. So
Nostalgia.
Yes, nostalgia. All right. So we come to the last category, and it is fittingly the endings. And for this, we are going to start with Brian.
So, my answer here is it's American Werewolf in London. There's not going to be much I say about Dracula, although I think it has like a nice ending with Dracula's demise, and it is very much like plays into the romance aspect of the movie. As far as a horror movie ending, American Werewolf, like we said before, it's like so quick and sudden, and then you have David's death. You got that music playing that just makes it kind of eerie because you just saw this brutal death of David, and then now you're just expected to, okay, enjoy the music, head on home. The movie's
Part of
done.
that comedy horror bit.
Yeah. So it's just like, and I think it carries the through line of the movie perfectly all the way through, because it's like you see them, like John Landis says many times, it's like they're the first shot of the movie is like they're in back of a truck with sheep. Like these characters are dead. No one is going to survive this movie. And I just love those like dread filled endings, much like The Thing and stuff like that. So I have to go with American Werewolf.
Liv.
Yeah, I mean, I've already said earlier that David's death is like one of the most memorable horror deaths for me, so it's hard to give this to Dracula, having already said that. I also, I don't know, I always thought that the romance that was played up between Mina and Dracula was a little weird in this version of it. So for him to die and then her to be like, oh, oops, Jonathan, I'm all good now, is a little funky to me. And American Werewolf, it's just so good that they don't even like give you the time to mourn David's death. They're just like, and it's over. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, cool. Megan.
All right, so let's say about these endings. I'd give it to American Werewolf hands down, because like not only is it like it's building up, he's turned into the werewolf, he's terrorized the town square, and he's now backed into the alleyway. And I forget the nurse's name that is his romantic interest, but she is like, David, like trying to like reach him, like there's some part of you that's in there. And you almost like you get this up close scene of his face, and you think that he's like recognized her, maybe he'll turn back, and then he just lunges at her, just gets gunned down. She's like, just lost the love of my life, like what just happened? And it's pretty iconic that he goes, not only is he shot as a werewolf, but then when he dies, he just reverts right back to his human form. And you get like a very quick glimpse of it, and it's like, there you go, folks. That's all, folks. So I don't know. I kept up with the pace of the movie. You have this horror moment, and all of a sudden it's comedy again. You're just like, what the hell just happened? And I just felt the Dracula was kind of bland.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, I think my answer for this one. It has to be Werewolf. Just the fact that when he died and then he transformed back into a human, and it made it that much more real, that much more sad. And like I'd love to know what Dr. Hirsch's next thoughts were after that. Oh, I'm wrong all the time, right?
All right, cool. Mia.
Yeah, I think these are both very much love stories to the core. My boyfriend David always says like American Werewolf in London is really just a love story, like disguised as a horror film. Um, and I believe the love story of Price and David a little bit more than I do Mina and Dracula, even though he says a great line, I've crossed oceans of time for you or whatever. I was just like, ooh, I love that. But I I think the build up to killing Dracula, it just was easy. Like I think they killed him really easy. I did like how the ceiling portrait was mirroring how she had killed herself and he held her and now she's holding him. Um, but it
That's a
happened
good
really
point.
fast. Yeah, I thought that was beautiful, but it happened really fast. It didn't really I was just kind of in shock whenever it showed the credit of directed by Frances For Coppola. I was like, that's it. That's all that's gonna happen. Like I just was expecting more and more and more and more because the movie did go on for forever, but it all kept a decent pace for me anyway. I was never bored. I was excited for whatever was happening next. And I just think if you're gonna build up to Dracula not prevailing in the end, like there should have been more of a it was just a chase. And the chase of we followed him here, we tried to catch a ship, now they're gonna go do this. It just happened really fast. And Werewolf has one of my favorite ending credit scenes. I remember the first time I saw it, and he's gunned down, and you hear her screams and everything, and it's all said and done, and then it's just like Blue Moon starts playing, bam in your face. I can still remember that exact moment because it was so powerful and profound, and I loved it so much. So for sure, American Werewolf in London.
All right. Well, I'm glad I went last because I don't like the ending of American Werewolf in London. So piss on all of you. I'm the first one to rock the boat on one of my shows. I don't like it. I never did. I get it ish. But I'm not gonna harp on it. If you want to come at me, come at me. But I just gonna go with sorry.
Too much nudity again.
that was your problem. I never had a problem with nudity. All right. No, I did like Dracula's. I liked it. I love the visual nature of it, the winter, heading to the castle again. I mean, that was like awesome. It was like a chase that it was like a chess match, right? They were trying to I love that tension. I'm not going right to the last frame of the last moment of Dracula to consider that the ending. I'm talking about the last part of the third act. I thought like it was fun for me. And I will say this, I agree with it being a little easy to kill him. I thought that was a little bit of a miss, but at the same time, at that point you went through this crazy adventure to get to this point, that I bought it, but it did bug me. But I'm gonna give it to Dracula, and that's that. But I will say this: while I don't like the ending for American Werewolf in London, I see how you could love it. And because it's quirky, and I love quirky usually, so I get it. I understand. That being said, all the votes are in. We will come back with a winner. All right, so we're back with a winner in our vampires and werewolf debate. It was American Werewolf in London versus Bram Stoker's Dracula, and in the end, with a 30-24 win, American Werewolf in London. So there you go. You just chucked the book?
No.
Holy crap. She's like, I love this book. This is from my childhood.
Get it out of here.
Shows how much you love American Werewolf in London. So werewolves win this battle, and I think we got a happy panel for the most part. But regardless, when you break it down in categories, you never know what you're going to get. In this case, it was a little bit of a beatdown for American Werewolf in London. But all in all, it was a fun show. Thanks everybody for being on it, and we'll do this again. I swear we will. From Horror Face Off, and everybody on this panel, take care.